In the intense world of professional basketball, there's one surprising fact that often gets overlooked. A staggering 2/3 of NBA players who go overseas to play in Europe end up failing and returning home prematurely. Why is that? Let's dive in and break it down in this video. You would think that players who have reached the pinnacle of the sport by making it into the NBA would have no trouble succeeding on courts across the Atlantic. But surprisingly, the opposite is usually true. I'll highlight the key reasons why today, along with some high-profile examples of NBA stars who didn't cut it in Europe. By the end, you'll understand why it's so incredibly difficult for even the best American basketball players to adapt abroad. First, let's tackle the biggest issue: the drastically different style of play in the European game. NBA basketball is all about individual ability, speed, and athleticism. But European basketball emphasizes fundamentals, precision, and teamwork. American players often struggle adjusting to the more rigid offensive schemes that involve more passing, screening, and ball movement versus isolation plays. Let's look at Josh Childress. After a promising start to his NBA career with the Atlanta Hawks, he decided to take his talents to Greece in 2008 by signing a 3-year, $20 million contract with Euroleague powerhouse Olympiacos. With that kind of money, surely he would thrive, right? Wrong. Turns out that Childress had difficulty conforming to the European game. His stats dropped off, and after just 2 seasons abroad, he swallowed his pride and headed back home by accepting a 1-year minimum salary contract in the NBA. In Europe, flair, flash, and self-expression take a back seat to perfectly executed offensive sets. And for American players used to showcasing their one-on-one skills, it can be a tough transition. Joe Ingles of the Utah Jazz summed it up by saying European basketball is team basketball, not individual basketball. It's 5 guys that need to be on the same page. Another factor is that European defensive schemes are typically more zone-focused. NBA teams generally play man-to-man with occasional zones mixed in. So American stars can struggle breaking down unfamiliar European zones when they are used to going one-on-one versus man defense their whole careers. Just ask Trajan Langdon. As a first-round draft pick and former college star at Duke University, Langdon entered the NBA in 1999 with high expectations. But he was a letdown, only lasting 3 seasons and bouncing around to 4 different teams. When his NBA career fizzled out, Langdon headed to Russia in 2002 for another shot with CSKA Moscow. Yet despite being named Euroleague MVP one season, Langdon still had difficulties adjusting to more tactical European defense. He never returned back to the NBA. The European leagues also place a premium on avoiding turnovers and unforced errors. NBA basketball allows for more creativity, risk-taking, and free-flowing improvisation during live play. But in Europe, players are expected to value each possession, run crisp offensive sets, and minimize mistakes. For American stars used to a certain freedom of expression on the court, this more rigid style of play can be challenging. Look at former NBA All-Star Stephan Marbort. After clashing repeatedly with coaches and management, he took his show overseas to China in 2010 when no NBA team would sign him anymore. Although Marbort eventually resurrected his career to become an icon in China, his first season abroad was turbulent. Marbort struggled mightily adjusting to the European-influenced focus on mistake-free basketball versus street ball creativity. At one point, Marbort was ejected from a game for intentionally kicking the ball into the stands in frustration over the restrictive style he was forced to play. He later apologized and ultimately thrived after learning how to temper his game. But it was a rough start. The demanding practice schedule of European basketball also catches some Americans by surprise. NBA teams generally practice for a few hours per day, but European teams routinely practice for double, even triple that duration on a daily basis during the season. Sessions often span multiple workouts broken up by film study and walkthroughs. This grueling routine can wear down players used to an NBA schedule. We saw this with former Portland Trail Blazers center Greg Oden. After years of chronic knee injuries, Oden attempted an NBA comeback in 2013. But still struggling with joint issues, he took his game to China instead. Accustomed to limited NBA practices, Oden was overwhelmed by the daily 7-hour workouts with his new Chinese squad. He ended up leaving after just one season, and later admitted the intense schedule was too much for his body to handle. The longer European season is another adjustment as well. The NBA regular season lasts 82 games over 6 months from October to April, but European leagues typically play a 9-month schedule from September to June, spanning 50-plus games. With fewer off days baked into the European calendar, NBA stars can feel burnt out and drained by March. Just ask Sonny Weems, a rotation player for 4 different NBA teams from 2008 to 2011 before heading overseas. After lackluster stints in Lithuania and Russia, Weems seemed to find his groove with the Guangdong Southern Tigers in China. He lit up the scoreboard early on and emerged as a star. But struggling with fatigue by season's end, Weems saw his play taper off badly down the stretch. Like many NBA players unaccustomed to the grueling European schedule packed with games and practices over a 9-month span, Weems ultimately wore down. The final big factor that American stars often overlook is cultural assimilation off the court. Sure, there are universal similarities between players: competitive drive, tireless work ethic, basketball IQ. But significant lifestyle differences exist across borders. And failing to embrace the local language, customs, and norms can negatively impact performance. Look at former NBA guard Delonte West. A solid role player in the NBA for 8 seasons, West pursued playing opportunities abroad after being out of the league in 2012. He managed to land a contract with Fujian Chongqing in China, but West reportedly had continuous spats with coaching staff and failed to mesh with teammates. He also refused to adhere to cultural practices like bowing to greet others. West was waived just months into his Chinese contract. So despite their elite talent and hoops resume, we've seen that a myriad of factors conspire against NBA players succeeding in Europe. Vastly different style of play and strategy, unfamiliar defensive schemes, lower tolerance for turnovers, demanding practice routines, longer seasons, cultural divides off court. It's a reality check for these American stars so used to dominating stateside, and the statistics back it up. Over the past 15 years, around 50 NBA players have tried continuing their professional careers internationally after leaving the league. But remarkably, only about 1/3 last more than 1 season abroad. The remainder end up being waived or released prematurely. So next time you hear about an NBA free agent pursuing their career overseas, know that the odds are stacked heavily against them no matter how skilled or celebrated they once were in the association. Crossing the pond and thriving long-term is truly a tall task. Thanks for tuning in and learning why so many elite American basketball players fall flat when attempting to translate their games abroad. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.